Welcome to Unleashed at Work and Home, the show dedicated to helping veterinarians, vet techs, dog trainers, shelter and rescue workers, pet sitters, and all the other animal-crazy pet professionals manage their stress and find more joy. I'm your host, Colleen Pilar, and I'm thrilled you're here with us today. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on your favorite app so that you won't miss a single episode. This episode is brought to you by our free community, the Circle of Resilient and Thriving Pet Professionals. If you like the ideas shared here, then you're invited to continue the conversation with other lifelong learners in the community. You can find out more at colleenpilar.com. It's the perfect place for you to learn cool stuff, feel good, and take action to create the life you love. Come join us. Welcome back to Unleashed at Work and Home. My guest today is MaryKaye Kendrick. She's a dog trainer based in Illinois with Pet Harmony. Welcome, MaryKaye. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks, Colleen. Thanks for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
I'm delighted that you could come. Can you just tell me a little bit about your work? What do you do these days?
Oh, that's such a good question. So I work for Pet Harmony Animal Behavior and Training, and I wear multiple hats for Pet Harmony. I currently do see private clients. So I see primarily dogs, but also we work with any species, really. I see some cats as well. We work very specifically on maladaptive behavior. So we are working with dogs many times who have been working with other trainers and are either now working with the veterinary behaviorist, and we, work with them to help kind of come to some kind of resolution with their animal's behavior. I also am a mentor for we have a mentorship program for behavior professionals who are interested in learning how to approach maladaptive behavior through an enrichment framework. The owners of Pet Harmony wrote a book called Canine Enrichment for the Real World. And so we approach our behavior cases very much through the lens of how do we meet needs first with an animal, and then, kind of formulating our plan around meeting needs first. And I'm also the team lead for our behavior consultants on our team. So there are several behavior consultants, and I am the person that they would go to if they have a question about a case that they're working on, or just, a client situation that they're working on, communication, maybe a breakdown in communication. We work through some of that as well. So I wear multiple hats for Pet Harmony. I can't say which job I like, which part of my job I like the most. I like them all. They all challenge me in different ways. My background is in social work, so in case management. So I kind of feel like I use a lot of that in all of the roles that I have at Pet Harmony.
Yeah, it is interesting how those skills would play so nicely into the multiple hats you're wearing, and how those also feed each other in different ways. So tell me a little bit about that. So social work was your first career, or was it not even the first career?
So I've had lots of careers. Can
you start me at the beginning?
I can try. I was super fascinated with behavior. I didn't know that you could do behavior with animals back in the days when I was going through school. So I went to school for a degree in psychology. And my first job out of college was working as a case manager for a social service agency that provided services for at-risk seniors. And I did that for several years. When I started to have my family, I took some time off, and then instead of going back into social work, I went into actually at the opposite end of that. I went into teaching in a Montessori school with little ones, so children between the ages of about 3 to about 6. I feel like all of those things have absolutely impacted how I approach, what I do now, the social work piece, the education piece, how we learn, how we all want to have control over our environment. Even when you think back to the seniors that I was working with and, the risk of them needing to, for alternative housing if, living at home was becoming too difficult for them to do. But how important it is to approach things from the framework of choice and control and having agency in your own outcomes. And that follows me to this day because I feel like even with, nonverbal learners, and other species with animals, they also want the same control and choice and agency in their own outcomes. And so very much everything that I've done in the past informs what I do now, for sure.
Yeah. So how did you get from Montessori to here?
Great question. Like all roads, it's, it takes many twists and turns, but I was working in the Montessori school for many years, almost 2 decades. And, while I was doing that, I was also volunteering in a shelter. I had decided that when my mom was helping take care of my mother, who had cancer, and one of the things she said to me repeatedly is that when I get better, I want to volunteer in a shelter. And unfortunately, she never got well enough to be able to do that. And so, kind of, I don't know, in a way to honor her, I was like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to, my mother had a true deep love for animals, as most of my family does. And so I was like, I'm going to honor my mom by volunteering in a shelter. And because I love behavior, I got bit by the behavior
Yep.
bug in the shelter setting immediately. It was always the dogs that were really struggling that I wanted to help. And so I just started going down this journey and this path of self-learning about behavior and how I could help these animals. And so I started attending seminars and started reading books and that kind of thing. And at the time, one of the owners of Pet Harmony was employed at the shelter where I was volunteering. So I kind of connected with her. Long story. We knew each other for years prior to that, but that's a separate podcast. um, so we connected there. She left to go to work elsewhere. When she came back to Illinois, she started doing some training things at the shelter. And I attended all of those, again, wanting to absorb every ounce of knowledge that I could. And so I, kind of started following her and saying, hey, I really want to learn about this. And one thing led to another. And, a couple years later, she was ready to hire someone as a behavior consultant for her team. And I fit the criteria that she was looking for. And so that's how I came to be doing private consulting with clients in their homes. But I also worked in that same shelter for a few years as well. So I kind of have a little bit of a hand here and a little bit of a hand here, still really passionate about sheltering and what that means and acknowledging all those folks out there that are doing that every single day.
Yeah.
Even though it's one of the hardest jobs that I've ever had.
Yeah. What did it teach you?
Perseverance, tenacity, grit, um, sorrow, what it means to fight a fight and not always have an outcome that you want, and not letting that break you, or when it does break you, picking yourself back up and saying, okay, what did I learn from that experience? What can I change? How can I, what do I have control over? And the only thing you really have control over in that situation is mostly the mindset with which you approach something that you can't really change a lot.
Yeah. And when we say that in words, the only thing you have control over is the mindset with which you approach these things that you can't change a lot. That sounds small and trivial and not helpful. And yet it's incredibly empowering and makes all the difference. At least That's how it sounds to me and to people I've talked to. I'm curious, how did it come? I'm struggling with my words. There's a concept here that's really important, and I'm trying not to put any words in your mouth. But the idea of our mindset and our beliefs and how we're framing situations, and that tremendously affects how we feel about them and how that happens both mentally and energetically within our bodies of like, I'm so exhausted, I can't keep going, can be shifted significantly if we change the way we're thinking about what's happening. And from a social work background, looking at that, the elder care, and then going to children where you could kind of create an environment for learning where they could grow and experience and kind of set themselves up for success. And then also the sheltering piece where you were creating hope for these animals for the future. The mindsets required are really important to keep it moving in a positive trajectory. So, oh gosh, I don't even know what my question is here, but it feels important. So humor me while I struggle through. I'm curious for you, what feels similar in those areas, for your career, for the very different areas, but recognizing that mindset matters and being kind of intentional about it matters. Okay, there's a question. We'll go with that one.
I think that, I love actually that you said that it sounds trivial, because it does. It sounds super easy to just like, say to someone, well, just change your mindset. And we know that there's just so much more than just the ability to switch mindsets, right? There's so many brain functions and things happening, and stress hormone, all of it is impacting, right? That mindset. And so it's very easy. And I don't want to trivialize anybody's experience in the shelter or work doing social work or in education, to say like, just switch your mindset, because it's not that easy. I think that it's like, first for me, and this is just speaking specifically for me, it is about acknowledging the really difficult pieces of any of those jobs. It's acknowledging that this is there are going to be days when this is going to feel really, really, quite honestly, really bad. And I also think that acknowledging that when burnout happens, it's happening for a reason, and that I don't think that that's so much a mindset thing. I think that is, when do we acknowledge that we're beyond the capacity to help ourselves and getting adequate support, whether that looks like therapy, whether that looks like a support group, but whatever that looks like for each individual. I think that is really important to acknowledge that. Like, I'm not suggesting that, just have a happy-go-lucky attitude. It's
I
not
know
that
that's the tricky piece. It comes across as like this toxic positivity, and that's not what we're saying. And yet the line can be gray when people don't understand the differences. So keep going.
Yeah. So I just, the mindset for me has always been acknowledge where you don't have the control, acknowledge where you do have the control, and work towards where you have the control, as opposed to focusing on where you don't have control. Because that's, I feel, for me, when I really start to feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I am a very proactive kind of thinker, in as much as I possibly can be. And so, I'm preparing for a lot of different contingencies in everything that I do, so that when things do hit a wall, or when they do feel overwhelming, I have at least mentally prepared a little bit for that. And then putting my focus somewhere where it really does have the most impact, the most possible possibility for impact. I mean, because it doesn't always work out the way we think it's going to. I do think that holding on to hope is really important. I don't know how to tell people to do that. There's been moments in my life personally more personally probably than professionally, where it's been very difficult, very, very difficult circumstances. And I mean, and, I did lose hope for a while, and I know what that feels like. So it's not, um, I'm not, again, trivializing it
Right,
at all.
right,
I
right.
understand that. But I also know that in the end, it is that hope, however you find it, that, is sustaining for me.
Yeah. Yeah. While you were talking, it was making me think about in one of the coaching courses I took, they abbreviated the cycle a little bit with a couple of steps. And it was OMG, WTF, okay. And the concept was you need to have the moment of like acknowledging, oh my goodness, this is huge and hard and deep and and like taking the space to see it all. Well, this acknowledgement state. And then the WTF is for sort of processing some of the emotions that go with that instead of pushing them down or shoving them aside and just moving right into action, but being like, wow, the level of grief I have here is tremendous. The level of disappointment I have, the level of frustration, whatever those pieces are. And then moving toward okay, which is not the same as it's okay. Like putting the little sticker on and going, okay, we're smiling now. But no, like, okay, given this circumstance and all that is here, okay, now what? What would I like? What do I want to do? And that's focusing that whole area of this. What can I control? What are the pieces that I can make a difference with here? And that's incredibly empowering. It ties back into that choice and agency you were talking about before, of that we can lose sight of that sometimes, where we feel that we don't have any choice or agency. And sometimes we don't have as much as we would like. Often we don't have as much as we would like, but we always have some. And finding those areas, I think, helps connect us to that hope and keeps it a little bit alive of like, well, what are the pieces that I have some control over? And so uh, I don't usually share that because I don't swear on my podcast. And so
But I
I,
love that. I love that. And
but
I love your, clearly defining that it's like the okay piece doesn't mean like
yeah.
everything's great, and yay, yay, rah, rah. It's maybe it's more about acceptance of like
Mm-hmm.
the things that we can't change and saying, okay, I've had time to, um, acclimate to this, and I've had time to, again, sometimes mindset is accepting the things that are not
Yeah.
changeable,
Yeah.
and then, we move forward from that.
Yeah. I think so too. It's an interesting piece that we all face this and we all experience it, and we don't have really good language around it. It's not
Mhm.
something that we have found ways to talk about easily and comfortably with one another. And so that often leads to people feeling like they're doing it wrong. Like they look around and see everyone else is actually showing up and getting things done, not knowing what the thoughts are inside those other people's heads. And then they're like, but this feels heavy and hard to me, not noticing that they're also showing up and getting things done. So from the outside, they also look like they're handling it well frequently. It's a tricky, tricky piece that we just haven't. We're doing better. Well, hence a podcast. We're doing better about making space for that. But really, it's very, very interesting to me with my coaching clients how many of them are pretty sure they're the only one who's screwing everything up, and they are in fact not screwing anything up, nor are they correct. They're the only one having these experiences of just like whatever I'm doing is not enough, and so therefore I am failing. That's a very, very common experience for pet professionals, unfortunately.
Yeah, one of the reasons we started our mentorship program, or the owners of Pet Harmony started it, is because of that very reason, that you do feel so isolated in this profession. And I think that it is very hard to explain adequately what this job entails to people outside of it.
Mm-hmm.
They might, if you say to people, I'm a dog behavior consultant or a dog trainer, they might, you know, think that that's like you go and you are teaching a dog to sit and stay and do those things. And sometimes it does include those things for sure, but there's so much more to it. There's the emotional, especially when you're dealing with maladaptive behavior, there is the emotional toll that it takes on every person in that household. And I would say probably extending beyond the household because, there's people that have opinions outside of the
Oh,
household.
yeah.
It's so impactful. And we carry those emotions with us as professionals. Sometimes we will leave a consultation and we'll have felt the impact of that animal's behavior in that home. Not and for the animal itself, I mean, suffering is never a fun thing to be you know, um, I wouldn't say a bystander, but it's never really fun to be like
The
part of the,
witness.
but it witness it. That's a really great word. Um, but at the same time, we we have to bear witness to it in order to help.
Yeah.
You know, you know, Part of my job is to give clients hope. It is to say, like, there's a way that we can do this. There's a way that we can help change the dynamic in the household. There's a way that we can advance your dog's skills and advance your skills. We can help you be proactive. There's a lot of things that we do that people don't recognize outside of the industry. And so it's really important to have a space to put that and to be with people that understand it.
Yeah.
One of the things that comes up repeatedly in our mentorship program is uh, just that feeling of like being an imposter, like I don't know
Hmm.
what I'm doing. And it's so clear that most of our mentees know what they're doing very,
Yeah.
very well. They do it very well. But having a place where people get it, having a place to be where people get it and where people understand is one of the most impactful things for me because I feel it's my community. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It feels like a community. It feels like a safe space to share really hard things, and to share joy and to share the wins as well. And for people, your audience that's with you to understand and to just absolutely identify with it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the community element of it is so important of just recognizing that there are others who do understand and there are plenty who don't, you know, outside these fields, it's the misunderstandings are tremendous of what the work is. And that's fine. Like I do not understand what the work is for so many different careers. Um, but to have people who do understand and to have a place where some of these things can be shared in ways that are generative as opposed to we've all had the conversations where everybody dumps their hard story and we all feel worse. Like that has a small place, but we really want to have a way of shifting it toward the collective up. Like how can we use this and move forward from it? Because otherwise, the other people's stories weigh us down even more. I mean, we're just adding to that whole secondary traumatic stress piece. Um, so I'm going to pivot just a smidge here.
Yeah.
I ask all of my guests to share some words that have meaning for them. And you shared some words from the naturalist Henry Beston, who I had not heard of before. So I looked him up. And here are the words that you shared. He's talking specifically about animals. They are not brethren. They are not underlings. They are other nations caught with ourselves in the net of life and time, fellow prisoners of the splendor and travail of the earth. So he's not only a naturalist, he's also a poet.
Yes.
Wow. Tell me a little bit about these words and, how you came across them and what they mean to you.
I don't remember where I came across them, to be honest with you, but it was years and years ago, and I actually found an artist in the UK who made a print of it with animals on it. So it's hanging in my office wall. And I read it, at least I don't read it every day for sure, but I read it monthly for sure, just to remind myself of the importance of his words to me. Because I've often thought, we talk about intelligence and we talk about humans, having, intelligence above other species on this planet. And I I would argue that it's not that we have greater intelligence, it's that we have different intelligence. That animals are on the earth and they're doing things within their power to, you know, survive and live. And, I don't know if they experience joy, but I would imagine that there's some level of joy. But for us I really love the quote because it tells me to be looking at them not as something less than us, but as something equal to us in a different way. And I think that when we look at all living things that way, we have a greater appreciation for them, um, including people who might, including people who might be, have a different lens with they see the world and interpret the world, and that we shouldn't be judgmental about those things, but should be embracing of them and saying these differences are what make us unique. All of us, all living things. The uniqueness of that is something to celebrate. And that's why it speaks to me because I think it's celebratory of difference and acknowledging that different isn't good or bad. It's just different.
Yeah. It creates space for curiosity around it as opposed to judgment. So this like,
Yes.
oh, fascinating, interesting. What would make this different? Why is this different? How is this different? What are the factors here? Yeah. Yeah. I think it's cool that you have it, printed and framed in on the wall. I think the piece that I think the language about caught with ourselves in the net of life and time and fellow prisoners of the splendor and travail of the earth. The the aspect of like none of us chose it. We're all here in this moment. This is happening. There's an element of that, of just like circumstance and almost lack of choice in the language there of like, we suddenly found ourselves in this situation. um, and, and that's interesting to me. I wouldn't have expected that from a naturalist. I don't know why I wouldn't have, because I've given not very much thought of naturalists, but the caught and fellow prisoners. Do those words, do those words evoke anything for you?
I don't know if you had a chance to read the rest of the quote, but I mean, he definitely is talking about, kind of the artifice of man and that, yes, we are here. We're just here on this earth. But I do think that it's interesting in terms of the, yes, we are both here at the same time. And the earth is full of travails and splendor, right? And that we are subject to both, whether we're human or a different species, and that, let's acknowledge that we each have our own roles to play and our own gifts that we bring to it.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether or not we're going through something hard or whether we're going through something wonderful. We all experience that. And I think it's the shared humanity is probably the wrong word because these
Right.
other creatures aren't experiencing it through the human lens, but we're all a part of this big network and this big web. And each component of that web has its part to play. And none of it, there isn't a single thing that's better or worse. It's just we're here together and we're doing our thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really cool. And it ties in so well with what you were saying earlier about like the seeing and acknowledging of what is present, both the good things and the hard things, and that is our experience. Nobody gets to go through life having it all good.
Nope.
And in fact, that would be painful and boring. And so then that would be not good. So there is this balance of that we do need some struggle as a part of life, and that struggle also allows us to appreciate all that is good. So the splendor and the travail. Yeah, it's lovely. Um, so if I could give you a magic wand and you could grant pet professionals some wish that you would bestow upon us, what would that be? What would you give us?
Wow, you did not prepare me for this question, so that's a good one. What would I bestow? I would bestow upon every pet professional who's out there just doing their thing, making a living, impacting change, to quiet the noise around them so that they can focus on the job that they're doing. I know that there's a lot of big feelings in the field and the industry around dog training. And I just want to say to folks that are out there doing it, I admire the heck out of you for going out and continuing to do it, even when it gets hard, even when you do feel isolated. I hope that you recognize in yourself the strength and capacity for care that you have, and the difference that you're making. Whether you're working with maladaptive behavior, you're working in a shelter, you're working in a daycare, the role that you have is instrumental, really. It seems like in the grand scheme of things, it may seem insignificant, but for each family that you interact with each dog you interact with, you're having an impact, and you're helping make change. And that is a very powerful thing. And it might be one dog at a time. It might be one family at a time, but that's okay. That's how sometimes the biggest change happens, is one thing at a time. It doesn't have to be this big, grandiose thing. It can be going into a home, working with that family, and helping them resolve things that were, making it hard for them on a daily basis. So my magic wand is to, take away the noise, focus on what you're doing, and recognize in yourself that you are amazing, and that the fact that you show up to do this every single day is incredible.
I just wanted to pause there, not respond for a moment in the hopes that it was sinking in for people there, because that's really a beautiful wish. And it's such an important one. Such an important one, MaryKaye. I really appreciate that. So if people want to learn more about you and your work, how could they do that?
I do have show notes, because they can definitely check.
I do have show notes, and I'll link everything up.
Oh, great. So you can find us at Pet Harmony, Behavior and Training. You can, email either our assistant account there. You could email me at my email account as well. Again, we are working on, I am a mentor for our Pet Pro. It's called Pet Pro program, as well as working with, pets in the home. We see people all over the world, because I mostly work in person, but we have some consultants who do remote sessions as well. So you can just look for us at Pet Harmony Animal Behavior and Training.
Awesome. Well, this has been such a delightful conversation, MaryKaye. I'm so grateful for you taking time to talk with me today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciated it.
Thanks for listening to Unleashed at Work and Home. I invite you to come learn more at colleenpilar.com, where you can be steady, be strong, and be long.